Hey everybody, how's it going today? I certainly hope you're doing well. I am currently not having the best day. Hasn't necessarily been a bad day, but I've struggled with motivation today. And trying to put notice of this out on Gab. So we can see if we have some people come on in here. So not the best day, not the worst day, that's for sure. Just kind of struggling with motivation a little bit. I think that happens to a lot of us. Some days are better than others. And what do we do on the days that are not so great, especially when we're sober? I mean, we can go into inebriation, or we can continue on the path that may not always be comfortable, but we know is probably the right place to be. Certainly has been for me, and I can only speak for myself. But being sober it's far better. Stevie Ray Vaughan, his, my best day, my worst day sober is far better than my best day using. And I don't like to speak in cliches, but sometimes, especially on bad days, sometimes there's a reason why people use cliches and why I talk about them so often. One thing I did want to talk about today is resentment. And it's defined, Google, their description is bitter indignation at having been treated unfairly. Now, I had a mentor mention let's look up resentment root word definition. Resentment root definition is what I'm Googling. When the person feeling of resentment is directed at the emotion itself or herself, it appears as remorse. The word originates from the French ressentir, to feel. And going back to that previous, so the French definition ressentir is to feel, and resentment, the current definition, the English definition, bitter indignation at having been treated unfairly. And the mentor I had who was talking to me about resentment is that it isn't always that feeling like in the current definition of resentment isn't always defined as the current definition of that feeling of being treated unfairly, but it's also that the French, combining the English definition and the French definition of to feel, and just using that first part of the word, re-feel. When we get into resentment, part of the resentment that we deal with when we go to meetings and through the steps and through the big book, is to get rid of our resentments. And sometimes it's just a matter of sitting around and refeeling our past, maybe it wasn't something that had been done to us, but something that we did to somebody else. That's sometimes called guilt too. When you just feel like S about some of the things that you've done in your past, well, that's resentment too. Refeeling something bad, whether it was done to you, have, indignation of being treated unfairly, but indignation at yourself. For me, that rings true because I refeel the crappy things that I did often. It's one of my main things to overcome, my main resentments, is refeeling the things that I did in the past. And that's a really hard resentment to overcome. And guilt and remorse, and they're not easy things to deal with. And one reason why I drank and used drugs is because when you're in that moment, when you're loaded, you don't really feel all that much. It's an apathy. It's a self-induced apathy. And a lot of times when it wears off, that's why there's people who are getting sober, especially in the beginning, struggle with depression, because they've shut off that ability to feel not only bad things but good things. And unfortunately, when you turn it off, I seem to be able to feel the bad things and not always the good things. So even in almost 4 years of sobriety, I still struggle on days like today when I'm just not motivated, and the refeeling of not necessarily ways that I was wronged, but just stupid things like high school days, even earlier than that, where I was just a dumb kid. But for those of us who are either blessed or cursed with a good memory, we're able to refeel those times vividly and often. And it usually comes in those quiet times. It usually comes when there's not much going on, when you probably should be doing something but are not necessarily motivated to do it. And instead of accomplishing and moving forward, you might be like have been doing, is resenting. So instead of, like I was talking about yesterday, the echo chamber that's in my head, instead of just leaving it there, here we are talking about the resentment, talking about refeeling, talking about all the stuff that we wish we didn't remember, and that we covered up. I covered up when I was drinking and using. And, it comes back. That's the problem with drinking and using for apathy, is that the apathy, just like anything else, it wears off. And we're left with feeling. So kind of to get out of that, and I talked about not speaking in cliches and not liking to use cliche language, but one of the things that is suggested of people when they're in these states is to think about the things that they're grateful for. And that is, for me, has become pretty easy now that I have, when you're first getting sober, there's not much really to be grateful for. Your best friend getting loaded is now gone. You have to restructure your circle of friends because you don't, not always, some people are able to hang out with people who they used to drink and use with. Or you're like me and you didn't drink and use with anybody, so you need to find a connection. You need to not need, but it's suggested to make some connections and to get out of what we used to do, which was just get loaded and be around people who were loaded and stay in that state of apathy. And I have, in getting out of my echo chamber and talking today, I did want to talk about some of the things that I am grateful for. You know, I am grateful that when we first get sober, there's usually a ton of S that we need to sort through in order to live a normal life. Whether it's court stuff, paying fines, owing people money, having people mad at you looking for you, or just the general distrust and disappointment in your family and friends of all the people that we lied and manipulated, you know, throughout the course of using. They don't trust us. In some cases, they don't want to have anything to do with us. And sorting that out is hard. And the best place to be at this time is probably, my suggestion is in a meeting. You know, there's a whole new circle of friends to be had. There's a whole new social circle that's just right there. And a lot of people in meetings and whatnot are super generous and welcoming people. There are those that are not. But if in going to enough meetings, just like if I was looking to score heroin on one corner, I'd go to another corner to find heroin. Or if I was boosting booze, if I went into a store and I was being watched too much, would I just stop and say, oh, am I going to get loaded today? No, I'd go to another store and boost some booze from another place. You know, as motivated as we were to get loaded, and I know I'm talking from a day when I'm not necessarily feeling motivated, but if we take the same drive that we had to get loaded, the same perseverance to get loaded and funnel that into the same drive to stay sober, we wouldn't just go to one meeting. We wouldn't just stay sober for one day, just as we wouldn't, if we were looking to score, we wouldn't just go to one place. We wouldn't just call one person. We wouldn't just walk one block. We'd walk a lot. We'd keep showing up. We'd keep trying. We'd keep calling the dope guy. We'd keep going to the next store or panhandling for change to get a bottle. And having that same drive is required sometimes in staying sober, because it's just not an instant thing. You know, people will go to a meeting or two, or they'll still stay sober a day or two, and they'll be like, I went to a meeting, or I stayed sober, I didn't really find anything in it. And it's like, well, what did you bring to the situation? Did you participate in the meeting? Did you meet any people? Did you get any phone numbers? Did you, in that day that you stayed sober, did you do anything that you liked? Forget being productive. Did you do anything that you enjoyed, or did you just sit and not bring anything into it? The analogy I like to use is, if you were with a group of people and they were going in on a bag and you didn't put any money in, when they came back, how much do you think, maybe a time or two, they'd have some mercy on you and sort you out? But in a circle of good, honest drug addicts, you're not getting in on that bag unless you put something in. And that's the same thing to be said about meetings or just a sober day. If you don't put anything into it, if you don't even do something that you enjoy, by putting a little bit of effort into it, even if it's just going somewhere and go to the park and make fun of people, that can be great fun. Or something, doing something, putting something in. If your buddies go and get a case of beer, but you didn't put any money into it, maybe a beer, They might, give you a pity beer. Some people are more generous than others. And I'm just using this as an example for an analogy because it's just suggesting that if you're new in trying meetings or trying sober days, it takes effort. It takes just as much effort, sometimes unfortunately, as getting loaded. There's sorry, I'm just checking the streams here. And part of my gratitude for today is that even though I'm not as motivated, feeling kind of blue, kind of resentful, I still have structured. I'm grateful for my routine that I have, because even if I'm not super motivated to scratch off a bunch of goals today, things off my list or do some stuff, I'm still trained in a routine enough that I can go through today without getting sidetracked and thinking about getting loaded. And it took a while to get there. And it took a lot of, that's why the suggestion is there, your first 3 months or so getting sober, be in a meeting every day. People rarely get loaded in meetings. Sometimes before and sometimes after, yes. But sitting in a meeting, rarely, you're less likely to get loaded. And afterwards, with a head full of recovery, it usually makes getting loaded a lot less fun until you can get to the point of apathy, of course. But when I was drinking, and once I had started, that, I had talked about earlier, the DTs, the detoxing from just about any drug can be super uncomfortable, and depression, but drinking is, when you stop after you've been drinking a while and your body's dependent on it, you start sweating, you start feeling nauseous, you got that panic, all that anxiety that you've been suppressing with a depressant, which is what booze is. And anybody who's drinking and taking antidepressants and they're wondering why it's not working, well, if you're taking an antidepressant and then you're drinking on top of it with a depressant, it's pretty simple as to why it's probably not working so well. I do not suggest that anybody just stop taking any medication or stop using any, especially alcohol and any type of benzodiazepam. Don't just stop. It's really dangerous. I've been there, and it's a horrible, horrible place to be. Do not just stop pharmaceutical medications or drinking or taking benzos without going to a hospital or talking to a doctor first. This is not professional advice. Not professional advice. So, well, that is just good old-fashioned advice right there. But I'm not trying to suggest that anybody who's taking antidepressants and drinking is to stop either one of them. But if you're questioning, hey, why am I taking antidepressants? And, well, do you drink? Yeah, I drink. It's a depressant, alcohol, and an antidepressant, whatever the thing is. There's pretty good reason probably why it's not working as effectively as it could be if you weren't putting one on top of the other, in an agonist and an antagonist. So when you are drinking, you have like sort of a clock that starts ticking when you stop drinking, if you're dependent on it like I was. And once you stop and your body goes into that freak out mode because it's used to having your blood alcohol content at a certain level, sweat, nausea, anxiety, because you, like I said, you're taking a depressant. It gets rid of any anxiety, and that's why people are less inhibited. Their inhibitions go away, and they're rowdy and they're raw. But the rebound effect of that when you stop is increased anxiety. And the same is true with opiates. Opiates are anti-nausea. They're anti-anxiety. They slow your breathing down. They are a constipator. So when you stop, you start coughing a lot, sneezing, watery eyes, blurry eyes, because they pinpoint your pupils when you're taking opiates, so your eyes get dilated and you're no longer constipated, that's for sure. And the anti-nausea is the opposite. So you get the dry heaves, or if you have anything in your stomach, which would be weird, you'll throw it up and just dry heave. Same with alcohol too. For me, it was the same with alcohol. When I would stop drinking after a period of time, I would just get the dry heaves for no reason. And the analogy I like to use with using opiates and heroin is the when you see professional chess players, or you see people in the park who are really serious about playing chess, and they have the little clock, and you have 2 minutes to make your move, and then you hit the clock to reset it, and the next person gets their 2 minutes to make their move. To me, it was like having one of those clocks. Every time I used, I would hit the clock. I would hit that little restart button, and it would give me another few hours before all that detox that I was just talking about, the kicking that I was just talking about, all those symptoms start to occur. You had a certain amount of time. So as I was going through and shooting heroin, after a while, I wasn't really even feeling high so much as I was just resetting the clock on getting dope sick, on starting to detox. And you begin to, and the same thing with drinking, to an extent. That's why people, when they wake up and, they'll have a drink to calm their nerves, so they need to have a drink at noon, or whenever the middle point is, they need to put something on board in order to get rid of the anxiety, the shakes, the sweating, the anxiety, whatever is happening now that you've taken out you've taken the substance out, and your body's trying to come back to it. So whatever goes down must come back up, and it usually goes up quite a bit higher than it was before. So when I talk about gratitude, and I heard this in meetings, but I didn't really get it until after a while. But what I'm most grateful for today is, first off, always is my higher power. Because until I stopped refusing to let Jesus in my life, I was not able to stay sober, and it took a long time for me to recognize my higher power as Jesus. I was just willing to say, a higher power, God. Yeah. And it took a while before I was able to recognize what I've always known for myself, is I recognize Jesus. Now, second thing that I am most grateful for, or Jesus is 1A, and 1B would be that I have a choice of whether or not I use today. Because when we're in that tissue dependence, when we have tolerance and withdrawal, I talked about cravings as one of the, in the DSM-5, as one of the, the criteria. Another thing that you have to have is withdrawal, tolerance and withdrawal. Tolerance is when it takes more of whatever you were using in order to feel an effect, and withdrawal is what your body goes through. The tissue dependence is another word for tolerance. What your body goes through when it starts reacting to the absence of the substance under tissue dependence. And that is what I'm grateful for, is that I'm not setting the clock. I'm not looking to, I don't have to use today. My body doesn't demand it. I honestly have a choice right now whether to drink and use. And that's my greatest gift right now. Through Jesus, I am able to, I have a choice. Because I chose for a long enough time that single act. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. So I made the act, the single action of stopping. Again, this last time I made the single act of stopping. That was the initial part of it. But it's what I repeatedly did afterwards. I repeatedly stopped. I repeatedly didn't go back on. I repeatedly chose not to use again. And through that, in almost 4 years, the one thing I can say that I've done perfectly, the only thing that I've done perfect for almost 4 years is that I just haven't gotten loaded. That's it. That's the only thing I've done perfect. But it is by doing that, by consistency, by the excellence to me is having the choice whether I drink or use or not. And in order to get to the excellence is not an act, but a habit, is that what I repeatedly did. I repeatedly didn't get loaded, and I repeatedly did what was asked of me and followed the suggestions that are outlined in the various self-help programs that are outlined. You know, there's ones through church, there's ones through 12-step things. I mean, shoot, if you can make one up that works, awesome. But the thing is that there just are certain things that are really best to do. You know, making the amends, continuing, being of service in some way. I'm not a meeting goer, but the last few years I've been in school working towards a degree in the field of counseling. Again, I'm not here acting as a counselor. I'm here as an addict who doesn't go to meetings, so here's my outlet where two or more are gathered. That's what I'm trying to do here. I don't know if I have two people here or not. I put little post-its over the things that say how many people are viewing, so there may not be anybody here. Nobody may ever see this, but that's not the point either. Part of sharing your testimony is healing. And whether, I don't necessarily care if it's seen or not. If it helps somebody, that's awesome too. But having a choice whether or not I use today is 1B, 1A being Jesus, and 1B being I have a choice whether I drink or use, and I didn't have that for a long time. You know, when I'd start again after a time in sobriety, you still have a choice for a little while. You still gotta. For me, I had about a week where I probably could have turned it off. The thing is that I just never turned it off. I always went for broke. I always went until the wheels fell off, crash and burn, whatever you want. You know, I usually went for broke every time. And when I didn't go for broke every time, I usually kept those 1 or 2 times a secret. And then that secret built into another plan. And then it went for broke. But a person has about a week or so. For a genuine heroin addict alcoholic like myself, I had about a week where I probably could have turned it off. before my body started to absolutely demand it. I mean, after a couple of nights, there may have been a sleepless night or two, or some withdrawals, some sweating. Another thing I'm really grateful for is that for whatever reason, and there are many possible, well, 2 significantly, maybe 3 possible reasons, but when I wake up with dry sheets, for whatever reason, I'm super grateful for that too. Super grateful for dry sheets and not having the dry heaves. Those are also pretty high on the list. Those are probably 2 and 3. And then comes, the routine. I have other options. I'm not driven. I don't have to use today. That's such a gift. And I apologize if I got a little bit sidetracked. So even though I'm not having the best day today, it's still way better than the bad days that I had when I was drinking and using. I still, crossed a couple of things off my list today. I did what I had scheduled for today. It didn't work ahead like I had wanted to, but I'm still holding up to my part. I'm keeping my integrity. Even though I'm not motivated today, and even though I didn't do everything that I wanted to do today, when I go to bed tonight, I guess that's the next thing I'm grateful for today. When I go to bed tonight, is that even though I wasn't necessarily motivated today, I still held up to my obligations. I still followed through with the things that I needed to do today. And that's a good feeling, even on days when you didn't do as much as you would have liked to. This picture today, this was Hood River Christmas 2 years ago. But that's kind of what it looks like up here. I'm in Washington, right there. Let's see. This side of the river is Oregon, and that side of the river is Washington. I am in central Washington, in Cascadia, and it's snowing again today. Been cold. So that's probably another reason why I'm down, is that I like to be outdoors, and usually when I'm not in school, I'll take off and be out in the woods for a lot of the time, or at least when it's not snowing out and icy all over the place, I'll usually go out for a walk after I finish assignments and like to get in a workout during the day. But today, I didn't work out. Not really feeling super motivated, but checked the things off my list I needed to, and was able to come in and do a live stream. And we may do something else later today. So if you watch this, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to do so. And if you've subscribed, I appreciate you there also. I am on, you can email me. My email is over there in the corner. Twitter, Gab, stream.me, FreeZoxy. I hope to see you all soon. Thank you.